Philip Anthony Kinsella. He's actually famous, right? You're sort of famous. Yes, you're famous. It said he's the greatest medium in England. That's what they said.
I won an award for it.
And he joined forces with Brenda. What's her last name? Butler. And she is the sort of preeminent researcher into Rendlesham, and he really teamed up with her, and they wrote a book together. And there's his book, Sky Crash, and I think it's gotten good notice. I'm halfway through it. It's fascinating, and I have long wanted a good other speaker besides Brenda. I invited her before. I can't remember if she ever spoke, but she's been invited, and she's even invited today. But so I just wanted to say that, he is, you're not an expert, but no. You certainly put a lot of work into it. So Rendlesham is a fascinating case, as you know. There's so much that still is unknown about it. And so welcome, Philip Kinsella.
Thank you. Thank you. I guess that I've always said that we're all important. Whether or not we're up here speaking, you sitting there, it doesn't matter. We're all part of the phenomena. And we always find that within the phenomena, there are high levels of synchronicity, not just levels of high strangeness, as we will explore. So this is the presentation of our research, or we will get to the research as I explain a little bit about myself and how I got involved in this, or what happened. So let's go forward. So this is where it all began for Brenda Butler, Dot Street, and Jenny Randalls, the book that began everything with regards to Sky Crash. We all know of the famous 1980 event at Rendlesham with Bentwaters, with Colonel Charles Holt, of course, Lieutenant Colonel Charles Holt. Anyone here know about the story? Do most of you know the story? Just put your hands up. Yeah, it's very famous and very well documented, and everyone believes that that's the only one event. So this is why when I teamed up with Brenda under the most unusual circumstances, most people just believe that the 3-night episode in the winter of 1980 that happened with the American troops stationed there at Bentwaters and part of the base's Woodbridge as well, that was it. But we know that it wasn't. Okay, so the headlines were splashed on the pages of the News of the World, and I believe that was in 1983. And the News of the World edition published in 1983, which made front-page news, claiming a UFO had landed in the forest of Rendlesham, Suffolk, and aliens seen. Now, the alien part is debatable, but as we'll discover with regards to Rendlesham, it's no different from places like Skinwalker Ranch in Utah and many other famous locations around the world that have these levels of high strangeness. And I believe that the establishments or those in power, those behind the scenes that are never seen, never heard of, pull the strings whenever these events occur, most notably around military bases. And that is something that's very strange. And as you know, Kerry knows already that a lot of the events that happened with those men at Rendlesham seemed distorted, as though each and every one of them were experiencing very different things. And of course, trying to put any pattern, any connections to it is almost nigh impossible. And I believe that's how the phenomena works, because we're left still puzzled. What is it? Where is it coming from? You know, what's behind it? What force is behind it? And I remembered that I was literally a young lad that had read this in News of the World, and then realizing years later that I would actually be investigating in the forest myself. Would you believe that? It was quite incredible. So this is my identical twin brother, Ronald, on the left, I'm on the right. This is a painting that Neil Geddes Ward, my good friend Neil Geddes Ward, did. He'd come over and he'd given us this photograph. The UFO phenomenon appears to have played a major role in both our lives, as is so often the case with many of those who have witnessed UFOs at close range, stemming back to our childhood and seemingly resulting in a series of incredible synchronicities. This may indicate an awareness from such forces which attaches itself to the experiencer. And we mentioned hitchhikers again with regards to Skinwalker Ranch. We know in most of the cases, as in other cases, that those that get involved are not necessarily those that have seen the phenomena, actually get some form of attachment linked with them or another family member. That is very interesting. So when my brother and I were young, we were around about the age of 13, and we had been staying with our maternal grandmother in their house in Middlesex, Felton, Middlesex. They had a great big house there, well, two actually, one beside the other. And as kids, we used to spend the summer holiday out in the back garden with our grandmother. And on this particular sunny day, and no, I didn't make a note of time and date. I was a kid, for goodness sake. People say, I need dates, I need times, as though that will solve the mystery. I'm a kid. We're out in the back garden, clear sky, and the silver orb suddenly came out from nowhere in broad daylight in the afternoon, and it came over to where we were positioned and hung itself around, because the house they had was about 3 stories high, and it was positioned roughly over our grandmother's head, but around about the second floor windows, and it was hovering there. It was about the size of a football. It was silver. There were no markings on it whatsoever. It made no sound, and it was quite unnerving. It was like something from Doctor Who. And when we asked our grandmother what it was, she said, she didn't seem fazed by it. She said, oh, look, the fairies have come to take a closer look at us. And yeah, that was her way perhaps of allaying 2 young lads. She was psychic after all anyway. And the object then seemed to be looking up through the windows. I say looking, there's no way. It seemed to be looking through the windows, or appeared to be interested. Then went over the top of the house. We ran into the house, up the huge stairwell, and across to their bedroom, my grandparents' bedroom on the second floor, the other side of the house, and saw it disappear very quickly. And I wondered whether or not this was some type of alien or extraterrestrial technology. I mean, people have said to me, oh, it's a secret military device. I don't believe that. If you see this, if you're in this nest of activity, it's really quite incredible. You have to really take stock of reality, and it throws you back, like that really did happen, but you know, there it is, but we can't explain it. So the Foo Fighters were classic back in the Second World War that had accompanied Allied aircrafts. So one wonders, you know, because a lot of people say, well, you know, these Foo Fighters were seen. But it was puzzling because I always thought that UFOs were much larger than this spherical thing that my grandmother and me and my brother had seen. And that very night, when we were staying with our grandparents, we stayed in the attic room. My grandmother had been speaking on the telephone desk that she had in the hall, because it had an opening, a hallway that went down, spiraled down, and she was talking to her eldest daughter, Betty, about the event. But then it was hidden. It was all covered up. No one spoke about it, which normally happens with these events. And that's my grandmother there, and myself on the left, my brother on the right, one Christmas, and not long before the events happened, of the events there. Now, it appears that both my twin brother and I, and it doesn't make us special. This is the thing within ufology. It's like a war ground. I've got nothing to prove. I can't claim anything. People say I want proof. Well, as my good friend Paul Sinclair says, it's the truth that brings no proof. There's little bits of it, but we don't get much of anything. But with both of us, we've had, I wouldn't say a lifelong connection with UFOs. There were 4 major events that I'm covering here today, and of course Rendlesham, which is really amazing, incredible what happened to us there. But for us both, it was like weird. You know, no one spoke about it, these levels of high strangeness, seeing the silver orb when we were young, and then going forward, trying to put the events together, getting involved within ufology even at that young age. I remembered I saw a book by Dr. J. Allen Hynek called The UFO Report, and I was young, and it had a cover of UFO, and because I loved the look of the book, my grandmother bought it for me. I couldn't understand a word of it at that point there, but I wanted it because it had a UFO on the cover. Then the true horror of things escalated in the winter of 1989. We had moved to the small village of Marston Mortain, and we lived in a cul-de-sac. And this is where my major abduction occurred, and one that I'm embarrassed to have reported, embarrassed to have come forward, because I suffered within the media cartel with regards to the abduction. But what the abduction did for me, as I go through it very quickly here, is it opened up another part of my mind, because I kept thinking, well, you know, how can there be a part that's physical and another part that was non-physical? And of course, I've never asked myself to go on anything. I've always been invited, and I will quite happily do that, if just to speak the truth. But this event happened where I'd come back from work in the winter of 1989, from the train from Bedford to Millbrook, walked to our close. We had a fairly big house. Walking up to the driveway, there's glass all to the front of the house, walk through to the hallway, and the glass doors to the kitchen. There's a reason why I'm saying this. And my brother and my sister were there with our dog. Our mother was out working late, walked up the drive, walked in, you know, leaned myself against the kitchen cabinet, and just looking out to the open hall, because I left the door open, and our dog is sitting in front of us. My brother is ahead of me, so he doesn't have access, because there's a wall to the dining area through to the hall, and my sister to my far left. What happened was very bizarre. The atmosphere started to change, and it became electrified. And immediately the dog started to react, and there was a light that was coming up the driveway, our driveway, that was illuminating the glass to the front of the hall. And I thought that it was my mum's car coming up the drive, coming back from work early. And then my brother was in front of me, and he went into a trance, and he lifted his head up and he said, "There's going to be an earthquake, or Grandma's going to die." Well, I was stunned. There was no earthquake, and Grandma wasn't dead at that point. She had passed over, but he was just frozen. And I don't know what happened to my sister. The dog started to go frantic. This light grew in intensity. All the hairs on the back of my neck came up, and I'm thinking, because I'm very grounded, there's something not right. And then the glass started to, would you believe, bend backwards and forwards in the hall where this light was. And this being, it was all in the waking state, this being about 3 foot tall with an oversized helmet on its head. It was all clad in black, very diminutive in size. It came through the pliable glass that was full of light and came into the hall. The light disappeared, and then the being ran in ahead, which would have been my brother's and mine's study stroke bedroom at that time downstairs, because there was an upstairs as well too, but we had one of the biggest rooms. So I snap out of it, my brother snaps out of whatever he was in, and I'm stunned to see it then run across from the corner from where it disappeared, across the hall and up the stairs. And I shouted, "There's an intruder in the house." And I screamed, "There's an intruder in the house." My mind couldn't register what had just happened, and I reached behind me to find a knife. I found one, nothing in the house. Later that night, I broke down, and I couldn't work it out. But in the early hours of the morning, I'll just go through this quickly because we are talking about Rendlesham. In the early hours of the morning, I then found myself about 3 o'clock in the morning on my back in the hall where the thing had come through. It's dark. And I'm floating on my back with my head facing the glass doors to the kitchen and then through to the conservatory this way. And a force is pulling me without me doing anything. And I'm awake and I'm thinking something's got hold of me and I don't know how I've got into this state. And I'm going through the glass and I'm thinking, how am I able to go through solid matter? There's a part of me trying to stop it. People say sleep paralysis or astral projection. Well, there could have been a part of the astral that was occurring, and that might tie in with regards to these entities and how they actually go through a process of abduction. I was awarded with a theoretical content back in 1996 with regards to a possible theory with the Greys. So I'm being taken through the house on my back, can't move, so my head is facing that way, so as they're pulling me forward. I get out into the conservatory, into the grounds, the back grounds, and then being turned upwards, and I can see the night sky and lots of UFOs moving through the sky, and I'm thinking, my God, they're real, they're here. What's all the big fuss? They are here. But and there was one big object that was stationary, it was dark grey, and as soon as I made a connection with it, that was it. I was being pulled up to it so fast. It was like being on a roller coaster where you get that funny feeling and you're going to make the drop. And I thought, I'm going to hit it, and then I blank out. The next part is where I really suffered, unfortunately, because I found myself in a room. It was a little bit dark. It was very hot. And I'm strapped to a bed. Embarrassingly, I'm naked. I'm strapped to a bed, and I wake up, and I've got a strap here, and my legs and my arms, and I don't know where I am. And it looks to me like the fixturing to this side is all molded into the floor, but there's a light directly ahead of me to my left, as though there's another opening, but I can't quite see it. But the true horror engulfed me when I turned to my right, and of all things, good God, there were these 3 reptilians, okay? So they were awful, and the sight of them, I can't even find the words, because it horrified me, because I'd never really heard about them. I didn't know they existed, but they were big, and they were this colour. I am colourblind, but they were kind of like, my brother's done the artwork here, but they were in a much denser fog, and they were moving backwards and forwards like this, to side to side like this. And the horror of it, and then realizing that there was something that had been placed in the lower abdominal region, and that felt as though organic within my stomach, and I screamed. I couldn't work out what the hell was going on, what these things were, what they were doing, why they were there. So I'm screaming, and I've never screamed so much in all my life. And it sounds dramatic, doesn't it? You go away and think, oh yeah, but for me, it's never, ever left my mind, not once. And I haven't had regression. I remembered it all because I'm hard to regress and hypnotize. So the intrusive investigation was being done. I'm in a state. I want to get it out of me, whatever that thing is and whatever they are. Then when I look, these 3 had disappeared, and whatever it was that was inserted to the lower part has been retracted. I could see it moving off the lower part, and this small grey, it's not a grey, it's more like a cream-coloured grey, appears from that opening around to the left. It comes forward. It commands me to dress. The things are released on me. I sit up, my stuff is on the floor, and I'm like, I've got to get out of here. I will, that thing was my saviour, although it probably wasn't. I need to get out. So I followed it, and round to the corner was a small corridor that came to what I thought was a wall. It's lit, and the grey's looking at me, and I'm looking at it thinking, well, what am I doing here? And where the door was, I saw an impression of a big tree, a huge tree, don't know what that's about, and then the opening disappeared, the wall disappeared to an opening, and I could see the village from a great height, where our house was, and it was getting kind of like, still dark, but going early morning. And the last part of this crazy thing is that I can see from where I am, there's another smaller craft by our conservatory. And the grey's asking me to get out. And I'm like, you want me to just get out? I can't, height's up my thing. I got upset, and then I felt this push. And as I'm coming down to the ground, there are 2 greys beside me. I was told not to look at them, even though I thought it was strange because I'd seen one up there anyway. We came to the ground, the last horror, and there may be a connection here. The last horror was about to occur for me. So as I come down to the ground, there is this grey that's different from the one I saw up there. It is uniformed. I call it Noddy. Of course, the name for the British author who was a J.K. Rowling of her time, Enid Blyton. It didn't look like Noddy, but it had this pointed hat on its head and a one-piece uniform. It had knee-high boots on, and it had its arms folded. It looked more humanoid. Its face was more pointed. It looked, but it was more muscular. And as it stood there on the ground by our conservatory where the pond was, we had a massive pond, had his legs parted like that and his arms folded, and it was looking at me real angry. And I wanted to punch it. I did. I was so angry because I'm confused. I'm thinking I wanted to punch this thing. But it felt like I'd been punched in my stomach, the solar plexus. And I thought, you're angry with me, I'm angry with you. So I think to myself, well, I need to ask it a question. How the hell am I able to get through locked and bolted doors? How is that possible? And I thought that if it felt like a he, although I can't prove that. People say, was it he, she? Well, you don't know. If he could give me that, I would have the answer. But when I asked him how the hell am I able to get through locked and bolted doors, it looked shocked. And then it started to slowly raise its head up to the underneath of its craft, and it started to rasp this unintelligible electronic language. It sounded like the cheetah voice synthesizer my brother and I used to have for our ZX81. And it froze, and I then saw myself coming crashing through the glass, through the kitchen, and then into my body. And as soon as I went into my body, I had a nosebleed, had to go and sort myself out, go to the bathroom. The next day, I had a triangular mark on the back of my right ear. We tried to take with pictures of an instant developing Kodak Polaroid camera. It wouldn't come out. Had 3 marks on my right arm, profuse nosebleeds to the right ear, and of course, nose, sorry. And then my right ear was investigated some years later for a problem there, which we think could possibly have been an implant. That's very strange. But anyway, now what's interesting before I move on now, here, is that I kept thinking, how on earth could one part of it being physical and the other part have been non-physical? And I kept thinking, I need to work out what happened to me. I went to a UFO group called Beams, and Kenneth John Parsons had embraced me into the group, and we used to meet people, and I'd come away listening to their experiences. And of course, the UFO phenomena seemed as though it was linked into the actual nuts and bolts aspect. You know, we're dealing with greys that are physical and the reptilians and whatever, the nature of the reality. But I was afraid to talk because no one spoke about the reptilians. No one said that, you go through locked and bolted doors like an astral projection. No. So what was it? And in 1996, when I was investigating, and just prior to this period, I had the answer. I thought I had the answer. It doesn't mean to say it is the answer, but it was like a download. I was at work in 1996, and this theory came to my mind. And thankfully, I documented the event in a magazine that Matthew Williams had done called Truth Seeker, I think it was. And he published the whole account in there that I kept. So there's an important part to this with a future book that a publisher brought out that retracted the abduction phenomena because it didn't fit within the modern annals of ufology. So this theory that I had was about the greys well, I couldn't use the word reptilians because, again, within the media, they didn't really understand much about that, but the greys are able to extract the real essence of what we represent and bring them into their filled frequency of reality. And I kept thinking, well, what are these beings? They appear to be, can't create, they come into a species that can reproduce. They're interested in reproduction, although we hear about that. They seem like clones. What are they after? What do they want? What is it about us that they wanted? We are sentient beings. We don't know enough about ourselves. The past has been lied to us about what happened in the past. The original codices from the past are telling a different story of creation. So I thought, well, it's got to be something linked with the afterlife or something linked on separate levels with the astral planes where these things are coming from and that could perhaps somehow intersect themselves into our reality through our consciousness, because consciousness is our reality. That's how we see things. They probably have access to the entire database of our system. But they want something. They want something from us. We don't know what that is, but maybe they've lost themselves through the act of replication or cloning and are trying to salvage a part of what they lost through us. Or it's possible they're creating a new species to live off-world because we are damned here on this planet anyway. So my first book was published by Kappa Publishing, came out in 2007, Reaching for the Divine. Would you believe it? I then started to get involved with mediumship because when my grandmother died, I went to go see a medium, and then the psychic activation started, and I thought, great. Here's the guy that believes in UFOs, and now he's talking to the dead. I thought my reputation could go no further down to hell ever. I would be the laughingstock of the entire whatever. But I thought, no, I want the truth. I want the entire truth. So in 2009, I wrote Believe, that was published by Kappa Bam. They're no longer around now because John Day sadly passed. But John said to me, I'll publish a book, but I need to retract the part in there about the abduction of the reptilians. And I was in a quandary. And why is that, John? Because they don't fit within the connection with ufology. And it was like a catch-22 situation. I said, okay, John, we'll just go along with it. But thankfully, Matthew Williams had published it before, because anyone would say, hang on a minute, you must have added that in later on. Do you see where I'm coming from there, yes? And the quandary I was in. So the book came out that was Believe. I believe that was a bestseller. I think that did quite well. I'm not really sure. I'm very proud of them. I was very honoured to have been published by them. And it was the only way I could get my book out there because I was, publishers are hard to find. And then years later, I met this lovely chap, Peter Robbins. And I've known him for years because he came to England to a Beams group with Larry Warren, and they were promoting Left at Eastgate. I'm not going to get involved with any of that. But he's a good man, Peter Robbins, and really very connected with people within the field of ufology. He's been a good friend to me and my twin brother. Now, Peter said to us when he come to Beams Group, you need to go to Rendlesham. You got to go there, you know. There's still a lot of strange activity going on there. So we thought, well, we'll go. Why not? Me, my twin brother, and a good friend, Susan Gamble. She's now Susan O'Connor because she's married. So we were known as the Scooby-Doo gang, and we go out there and investigate. And interestingly, with regards to Rendlesham, we had gone there some years before because there was a team of us that went in a minibus with Beams to look at the forest and do a C5 initiative. We didn't see any UFOs, but we did encounter a strange man. Was he a man? Debatable. And then years later, finding out the amazing information that Brenda Butler had with regards to a David Daniels, known as the Reptilian Man. And that may sound incredulous to you guys out there, but let me tell you, when you find out who this person, David Daniels, was linked with, it'll blow your socks off. So my brother and I have met Colonel Charles Hott. We had dinner with him. He's a gentleman, to be sure. He is absolutely as sharp as a knife and told us all of what he and his men had experienced at Rendlesham. He still says that whatever it was not from this world. And let me tell you, with the ground research that we did, doesn't make me an expert, and you have to be very careful when you're stepping on other people's territory. When you're out there, people have said, oh, it's the Orphaness Lighthouse, the light from the lighthouse. Absolutely rubbish. Shall I tell you for why? Because we've been there and we've seen it when it was in service. And if the American troops, any troops for that matter, are chasing the lights to a lighthouse, God help all of us. You're dealing with trained military guys, absolutely on the ball, on par. So these men know what is what. But people bought it. People that sit in the armchair, criticize, attack. No. Go out there and see for yourself. And then you'll come away with a completely different perspective. So this gentleman here, this man, and also I have to thank John Hanson as well of Haunted Skies series, because he had been very instrumental in the development of the second book, Sky Crash. Now, Sky Crash, that Jenny Randall's, because Jenny Randall's, Dot Street and Brenda Butler had been linked to Bufora here in England, and their book was published eventually by Neville Spearman Limited in 1984. It was released in 1984, even though the press cutting from, I think it was someone called Art Wallace, wasn't it, came from News of the World back in 1983. We know who that was. And I remember thinking, oh my God, they met aliens. My God, as a kid, I'm like, wow. So, does this mean to say that as a kid, my fascination had drawn this phenomena to me? Because a lot of people say, and especially Paul Sinclair from up north says, when you become aware of the phenomena, it becomes aware of you. Now, this is the real strange part to Rendlesham Forest, what happened to us there. Even to the extent of an amazing craft that we had seen, that we had summoned, so to speak. Our own investigations began in and around 1997. This led us meeting Brenda Butler. Now, let me tell you about that. When the Scooby-Doo gang used to go to our investigations in the forest, it's about 2 hours' drive from where we are. I didn't know where in the world Brenda Butler was. I didn't know I was going to get involved in all of this. And I remembered I rocked up at the forest with Susan and Ronnie one night and got out the car and I said out loud, I'd really love to meet Brenda Butler. Not Jenny Randall's or Dot Street, but Brenda Butler. And people say, well, didn't you know? No, I didn't know where she lived. I didn't know where she was based. I was a little bit ignorant of that fact. You understand? I'm being honest here. I'm not an expert. I didn't know where she was, as God is my witness. So we're out in the forest and It's getting dark, and we could see these lights in a patch of the forest, and we think, oh my God, there's a UFO. There's a UFO, it's over there. So Susan, Ronnie, and myself go over, and it's not a UFO. It's a lady with a big white German Shepherd and a man. And we passed them, and we thought, well, we'll be polite. Hello there, how are you? And that was it. And I walked forward, and then this feeling struck me. I said, I need to go back and talk to that lady. I need to go back and talk to her. She can verify this to you, Brenda Butler. So I went back and I said, are you looking for the orbs? Because they had this music playing. It was like, woo, 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 and they were taking pictures. And she said, yes, why? And I said, well, I was rather hoping I'd meet Brenda Butler. She said, my dear, I am Brenda Butler. And then she proceeded to show us videos that Pete Parrish was there, lovely gentleman, a respected man, and he was showing us these films of this extraterrestrial they caught on film, and I'm thinking, well, you don't see that on the national news, do you? And we asked them to replay it again and again and again, because I wanted this thick thing in here to acknowledge what I was seeing was what was being shown to us. Well, it felt like I'd won $1 million when I saw Brenda, and we ended up working together on the sky crash that we'll get to in a moment. So A Cosmic Conspiracy, the sky crash, is the co-author to that, because she hadn't had anything else published bar from A Sky Crash, A Cosmic Conspiracy by Neville Spearman that had then gone into paperback after hardback, and of course she had problems with another publishing company abroad they had. So it was a lot of hard work, and I found this book to be hard work as well too, with regards to writing it or getting it constructed in a way. Brenda did say to me jokingly, she said, I'd like it to be called Life on the Move. I said, no, Brenda, we can't have a title like a gypsy book. It has to be something the sky crashed throughout time, bless her. So our investigations, not always with Brenda, because we hadn't known Brenda at this point when we had done the experiment that I'll get to. So I had no idea where she was in the world, Brenda Butler. Got out the car when Susan Model and myself had ventured once again into the forest. I asked out loud that I'd like to meet Brenda Butler. That very night we caught sight of flashes coming from the forest and soon realised this had been Brenda, along with her fellow researcher friend Pete Parrish and her white-haired Alsatian. They've been conducting experiments, which I've just said there. And it's incredible, because I didn't realise, I mean, I knew about the 1980 event from when I read it in the newspapers as a kid, but I never would have believed that I was then stepping on the territory of the very place where the American military guys, all to be respected. And before anyone makes an opinion or judgment of any of them, please understand that when you are in that situation, it is a very different thing altogether, completely and totally. When you are the nest of the activity, when it is happening to you, it is a totally different experience, completely, I can tell you. And people say, oh, you know, this happened to you. Well, yes, and it's hard for you to try and find the words to translate the information into a language that you can understand. And from the heart and soul, this bled for me, because I'm like, I claim to have had an abduction back in 1989. My brother, myself, and our grandmother had witnessed a Foo Fighter in broad daylight. Who the hell's going to believe me? Until I had some help, a lot of help from Kathy Marden. Kathleen Marden is the niece of Betty and Barney Hill. You know about the New Hampshire famous abduction in America in 1961. And she's been of great assistance to me and my twin brother, as with a lot of other wonderful American researchers. I'm very, very proud and grateful and humbled to know. So now, when we were doing our investigations in the forest, this will get your back. This got mine and my brother's hairs on their necks up again. On one occasion, I had used my mobile phone. People say, I want the phone, I want this. Do you know what? Forget it. I took the picture. This is years ago. And we didn't even know that this image was on there when we took the picture. So we go around the forest and just use our phone, mobile phone. You know what you do? Just taking pictures. But this image on here turned up there. Can you see that? Yeah, it's been analysed. It was sent away. I was linked with another person who I'm not linked. She's not linked with me anymore. But she actually discovered it on the picture. And blown up, there is, I know that... I can't remember if it was Kodak or who analysed it. It's not what they call, and I never can get this word right, go on, you say it, pareidolia, isn't it? Pareidolia. It's not pareidolia. There is actually a being that is standing in front of that tree. It's actually a being. and it's half-built. And we thought, first of all, that this half-built being was some kind of Hispanic guide or spirit guide with armor. But in Australia, there was a program on called Mysterious Universe, and the guys are renowned for, being very difficult. When they reviewed my latest book, Terrestrial Trespassers, they had this on the screen, and they reckon it's some kind of build-up to a Sasquatch, would you believe? I'm not getting involved with them or what, their arguments or whatever, but they reckon it looks like this is something like a Sasquatch that's half building itself up. So this is in the Forest of Suffolk. This is not far from the twin bases where all this activity was occurring. So that was quite incredible for us to actually capture that and keep that. I have that picture safe. So it looks like a Sasquatch. I still think it looks like a Hispanic spirit guide or a warrior. I don't know, but I'm not going to argue. But there it is. Can you see it? Strange, isn't it? And of course, this is the area where UFOs were seen. And there is the image of it there. You can see that. That's going back to that image, a large image of that there. Very strange. So I also thought, well, is it possible for us to call upon these occupants? Was it possible for us to perform an experiment to see if we could summon a craft in Rendlesham Forest? And I thought, well, man with UFO interest talking to the dead, I didn't care if my reputation went all the way down to the drains. Not the loo, but the drains. I wasn't bothered. It was more of a personal thing. There comes this thing within your heart, your soul, where you want the truth. Excuse me, you want the truth. It burns inside you. And that truth still burns inside of me, not just with the psychic work or the investigations into near-death experience or anything like that, but it's coming from deep within. And you'll find that you go through a harsh journey because you're trying to deal with this life, with the people in it. And people complain about those at the top. And, I understand with Andrea what she said, absolutely. You just have to let them get on with it, because the more energy you give them, then the more control it has over you. But dealing with basic life, like get up in the morning, shaping yourself, getting yourself ready and feeling how you're feeling and dealing with other people, it's not just them at the top, it's people on our level as well. And trying to live a normal life when you've been touched by the singularity changes absolutely everything. So you have to live with that. I'm sure many of you know that. You have to live with it. And the system continually tells you UFOs do not exist. There is no such thing as life after death. Yeah? But you'll pay your taxes, ask no questions, and then die. It didn't make any sense to me. It's like, this is crazy. So I thought, let's try it. Let's see if we can call the occupants. And I got the idea from Karen Carpenter's song. I do love the late famous artist, Calling Occupants, Karen Carpenter. So I thought, let's try it. So my brother, myself and Susan sat in circle in our house in Kempston, Bedford, and we sat in circle. We sent out our intentions. We said to them, whoever they were, look, we're coming on the 8th of June, 1998. We want you to show yourselves to us. We are not going to take any film footage. We're not going to take anything. We just want it to be a personal experience, something that comes from within here. We sent out intentions. Nothing came back. We kind of like, did you get anything? Well, no, but at least we sent them out. So the 8th of June 1998 soon came round, a week later. And we used to do all our investigations within primarily most of the areas of the Woodbridge airfield, all round the forest. But we actually used to place our camp here, just there on the outskirts of the forest and in a farmer's field. And that's where our camp would be, because when it starts to get late at night, we try to find out the spots where the original UFOs had come with regards to the 1980 event. I don't think those markers are actually correct where they put them. I mean, who am I? But I don't think they are. But anyway, we based our camp here, around here. And so we go to the forest, get out the car, and we're waiting for it to get dark. And it doesn't help that I'm wearing a thick cream top, because directly across the field, the farmer's field, is the farmer's house. And the farmer was known to chase people off his land, quite rightfully so. So we're sitting at the edge, and it's getting dark. It's roughly about 20 to 10. I get the dowsing rods out, then I go out into the field. Half of the field is dirt, half of it is crop. This is the 8th of June, 1998. And so I go out there, and I think I found the spot because the wires cross over, and I say, come over, let's meditate here. So could you imagine it? It was a beautiful night, the stars were out, the moon was out, 3 relatively unimportant individuals traipsing onto someone's property, their field, trespassing, sitting in a circle, starting to meditate. So we did just that, and then something incredible occurred because when we finished our meditation, we looked around, we got up, and at 7 minutes past 10, exactly, there was a red light about the size of, again, maybe of a football that was coming from the farmer's house or around that direction of where the field was, and it seemed to be glowing quite brightly, and we thought that the farmer had seen us, was on his way across that bit of dirt land to chase us off. So Ronnie and Susan started to run back, and I did. And I stopped and thought, well, hang on a minute. I'm colourblind, but I know red and I know white, and I know a car's light is not red. And as we're watching this light, it's coming towards us. So it's about that low on the ground. It's dirt, so there's nothing there. And then it shot straight across the field, really, really quick, and disappeared into the vegetation, the part of the farmer's field that was growing crop. We thought, wow, that's amazing. Well, at precisely 10:15 p.m. at night, and in the region of the farmer's field, just outside the forest perimeter, we had summoned a UFO of huge proportions. A week before, we had conducted a psychic experiment to see if they could reveal themselves to us. This came about when we listened to the song by American singer Karen Carpenter. Now, I will say to you that there was a flash of light, huge light, across the other side of the field where the crop was growing, above a tree, and this pyramid-shaped object appeared. It was quite big. And underneath it was a gap and a circular undercarriage that had a bank of blue lights around it. So on one program, they've done it moving. It didn't move, it just appeared there. And the top part of it, the triangular connection, the pyramidal shaped device, was moving one way, and underneath the other circular undercarriage was moving the other. They seemed to be like a witch's hat, but a slight separation. The bottom of it had a bank of blue lights. The top was glowing all this energy from it. Well, we had a pair of binoculars on us. We looked at it. It was the most incredible thing I have ever seen in my life. And then I started to bolt towards it. And as I'm running, I'm shouting back to Ronnie and Susan saying, tell me it's a pyramid shaped. Tell me it has a circular undercarriage. Tell me it has a bank of blue lights around it. Tell me it has light coming. And the reason I was doing that is I wanted to confirm that they were seeing the same as what I was seeing. So I'm running towards it like a half-crazed hominid. The top part of my jeans are getting soaked by the crop, literally, but my mind is fueled. I want to get to it. I want that. I want to know what it is. I could have been blasted out of the sky. You know, I don't know, but and I ran and ran and ran towards it, getting closer. I can still see it today. And when I got under it from the tree, it was absolutely incredible. And then I tripped, and as I tripped, it went out, like someone flicked the lights out. I fell onto the ground, took in a load of dirt into my mouth, and then I spat that out, and then I began to laugh. And then I cried because I thought, my God, it's happened. It's actually happened. There has been some form of contact, but how was that initiated? Were they aware of our thoughts? Was the force or energy aware of what we intended? Was this a manifestation of our own mind? No, I didn't believe that. I believe there was some kind of interaction from them on some level. But that was fascinating. And then the very next day, I sent a full report to a magazine, UFO magazine, and spoke to a man called Bream Forbes. And Bream Forbes told me to send all the pictures and information, and he passed them on to Peter Robbins. Well, he didn't know that I knew Peter Robbins. And I thought, well, why would Peter Robbins be interested in this? There were other researchers. It's just, I wouldn't mind it. So I duly sent it. Ronnie and I sent all the information, didn't hear anything. I think it was about maybe some weeks or a month later. I didn't hear anything, so I phoned the magazine up, and they said they've got no one there by the name of Bream Forbes. A conspiracy? I don't know. It was just all very strange. Someone said it's the military using holographic technology to trick us, but why would the military industrial unit waste all that money and resource on three relatively, and again, unimportant individuals who has no real say within the annals of UFO research? So it didn't make any sense. To us, it was real. It appeared and disappeared. Now, what's interesting is that going back into the 1980 event, I'm sure you're aware of Jim Penniston, Sergeant Jim Penniston, who had seen this device that was pyramidical in shape but flat with a high part to it. And he'd obviously received a lot of binary downloads. You heard about them as well, yes, the binary downloads? Yeah, and Brenda Butler also received binary downloads that is actually in Sky Crash. And by the way, I do have, I think, about 9 copies with me. If you want a copy, they're £10 if you want a copy of the book. Nothing like advertising is there, but no, never mind. Poor author scraping the barrel, you've got to do it somehow. But these symbols are interesting. Now look at this symbol here, because I have all of the material. This symbol with a circle and the pyramid. And the object, I'm not putting things together here, the object that we had seen was also a pyramid with a circle, yeah? And of course, as we know that the craft that he saw wasn't very large, I mean, to be honest with you, when the craft that we saw, I didn't think or feel that it would be able to have any more than one extraterrestrial in it, if that. I mean, it was big but shaped oddly. But we are looking at some kind of projection of technology through the mind, through interdimensional levels that would baffle our human intellect. But I just thought that was quite curious. What do you think? Because there is some kind of encryption, I think, within the graphs that Jim Penniston is famous for. And you can understand, because the phenomena does affect you, as it affected all those troops, all those men. And dare I say it, a civilian, when you've had this experience, that changes everything for you. And it makes me laugh. It's just 1980 event, 1980. No, we were to find out there was a history of UFO and strange paranormal experiences that occurred in that forest, and some of which that gave me the willies, I can assure you, that I'll go into. So it had also been hounded at night. Remember, our research was over 10 years. And sometimes we saw nothing, and sometimes we were rewarded. But we were hassled by big, huge, black helicopters that were coming down to treetop level. Now that forest is open to any of the public, right? So anyone can have access to it. But they were coming down with Susan and I and Ronnie, and sometimes with just Susan and myself. It's kind of scary at night when you see these helicopters above treetop level and the trees are wavering and they're like trying to get you out. They want you, it's almost like intimidation. And on one occasion, I'll just tell you, helicopters hovered above treetop level, hassling us at night. On one occasion, when we had set our base up, do you remember that little map I showed you of where we put our blanket? On one particular occasion, we had I decided to go off for a cigarette, because I used to smoke then. And I'd only gone for about 10 or 15 minutes, my brother and Susan. We came back, and we were shocked to see that someone had placed a dead rat and a dead rabbit on our blanket in a circle with tail to nose. So the dead rat and the rabbit, they were fresh. We were truly disturbed. Now, thinking back to it now, you can try and put things together, but that was really quite nasty, because I remembered I was shocked knowing that someone had gone out, killed this dead rat and this rabbit, however, put them in a circle on our blanket as a warning. We felt it was a warning. Someone was toying with us, and then the shock that when we were looking around, I didn't have infrared cameras, I do now, but at the time we're thinking someone's been here, or dare I say the word something. But the shock of it was disturbing, and I've spoken to some other researchers to try and find the symbolism of the dead rat a rat and a rabbit, but done in such a way, a nasty way, to bring the head to tail. Now, someone's had to go out there and kill them fresh, because they didn't look like I don't know how they died, there were no holes in them. But that's what we had. So on top of the helicopters hassling us, our vehicle being looked over by military, the tyres indicate that trucks are parked close to where we were, because what we used to do is when we parked the car up, not in the car park, but certainly in varied areas of the forest on the outer perimeter, because you can't take it into the forest, we checked, and there were huge tyre marks. So we'd had visitors that had come to check the number plate of our vehicle on varied occasions. And on another occasion when Susan and I had been out there, we had been in a wide open space and there was a light activity, strange light activity to our left. A military helicopter was coming down to the ground into this open area. The pilots were facing us so they could look at us. And Susan and I were like, you need to look over there because the light in the sky, that shouldn't be there. Nope. They were still, and I thought, my God, I'm sorry, I was going to brick myself. I thought they were going to land and come out and arrest us because they brought the helicopter right down to the ground. And it was they're just looking at us. And we're like, well, we can be here. That was another, so we decided to go very quickly. And then as we left, the helicopter came up and kind of like tracked us. But we're thinking, well, weren't you more interested in the light over there? That was more interested in us too. No. There were rumbling sounds coming from under the ground. We could feel that sometimes like an earthquake from where we walked in different locations of the forest. It was like a rumbling sound. Like there was no, we said, can you hear that? Can you, sorry, hear that and feel it? Not so much hear, I'm sorry, but feel it. I think there was a case where we did hear something like a rumbling. And of course, they've got these great big, huge stone things the plates that are covered. If they're uncovered, they lead to a lower part to the base or underneath. I wouldn't go down there anyway. We'd also had someone spying on us on another occasion. It looked like he was holding a gun by the open field. Maybe that was the farmer. And different coloured orbs has also been seen within the forest itself. So we've seen different coloured orbs appearing and manifesting. And also, another time we had gone down to the gates of the military base, and it was before dark, and Susan, myself, and Ronnie were, has anyone been to Rendlesham? Have you been to the base? Yeah, a few of you. When you go to what they call Eastgate, it's a very long drive down, and it's a lonely drive, or a walk. It's a long walk. And on one side is the military base, it's all fenced up, and the other part forest. So we're down there, and then all of a sudden everything went quiet, and there was this thump. It was a loud, organic thump. It was so heavy, and it was coming directly to our right. So the military base, the opening base is there, but there's foliage. It was to our right, and it was like a big, heavy thud. I wonder whether or not that was the formation of a cryptid, because we said to each other, we need to get out of here now. We need to go. We didn't see anything, but we felt, when you get that feeling like, we need to get out of here, because I knew that we were in danger. It sounds dramatic, but at that point we were. So the forest had all of these strange things. I know Brenda gave me access to her manuscript. And I said to her, look, Brenda, let's do something. Let's work on a project, because you haven't had anything published in Sky Crusher Cosmic Conspiracy. And she said, okay, I'll let you have access to my manuscript. So I was looking through her book, and I was shocked to discover that she had mentioned someone called David Daniels. And he entered the scene around about 1984. And David Daniels was allegedly a reptilian. He first appeared to Dot Street. I think he'd gone to Jenny Randall's, and Jenny Randall's thought that he was just crazy, but he'd gone to Dot Street, and Dot Street wanted him out of her house. So Brenda can understand why David Daniels didn't seek her out and go to hers first. But he'd actually transformed himself into his original shape as a reptilian, and he went by the name of David Daniels. Now, Daniels has sought out other prominent figures within UFO research, namely Lieutenant Colonel Wendell Stevens. So this guy was definitely not from this world. I mean, when he stayed with Brenda on her small property, he stayed in a caravan, and her partner then, another Chris Pennington, said that, when he stayed in there, he didn't eat, he didn't seem to drink, and if he did eat, he ate sweets, and he didn't seem to be changing in clothing, or wore like a leather jacket, and he looked like a smart military guy. But the outside of the caravan that she had, all the paint had flaked off it, as though there had been some incredible heat coming from within it. And he could also mind read. He can read your mind. He seemed to get into your subconscious mind, into the mental processing as well, and a very strange person. But we do know that David Daniels also went to America and Lieutenant Colonel Wendell Stevens, it's a little bit sensitive here, but he was in prison, but Father Daniels then had gone in as a priest and wanted to meet with him, and tried to deceive Lieutenant Colonel Wendell Stevens, who became suspicious of him and wanted someone to go and find out more about him. Also, Lord Admiral Hill Norton. Now, most of you know about him. Do you know about Lord Admiral Hill Norton? So Admiral Lord Hill Norton was Chief of Defence Staff of the UK and became Lord of NATO's Military Committee, a very high official within the world of government. The meeting occurred in the House of Lords in 1985, where Brenda was searched, but strangely David Daniels was not, because he wanted to go and see the Lord to talk about his plight within the Pleiades star system. Now, can you believe this? You know, we're talking about a high-ranking lord who's going to have a meeting with Brenda Butler and also a guy that to him claims to have been from the Pleiades. And the meeting goes ahead. When they got into his office, Brenda passed across Hill Norton's desk a copy of her book, Sky Crash, A Cosmic Conspiracy, and the peer pushed it back, stating that if it had anything to do with the Americans, he wanted no part to play in it. So obviously he knew the Americans were involved with UFO, the connection with ufology, or the connection with that. David then went on with his case of interplanetary disruptions within the Pleiades star system. The Lord's hands were tied and he could not help. One wonders with regards to this meeting what the Lord knew or thought about all of this, yet we must remember the late author Georgina Bruni, You Can't Tell the People, and I did meet Georgina Bruni with Nick Pope on a TV program that we went on many years ago. This is before and when she had been working on You, the Public Deceived. We've got to remember what Baroness Thatcher had told to Georgina Bruni when Georgina Bruni, God love her soul, had said to her about UFOs, and Thatcher's response was more or less to the lines of, get your facts right, and when you do, that's when you'll find we can't tell the people. What do the elite know? What do they know? What are they hiding? And this is not just a case of, oh, the population won't be able to handle it. You're kidding me, right? The religious ideologies now are breaking apart. It's important constructs for many, but we know that it was created and manufactured to a degree to control and subjugate human consciousness. We know this in varied fields, not just with UFO research, but also in psychic phenomena. You know, if you dared think outside the box, you were burnt or considered a witch or drowned, you know? We know what they're doing. But these people, you've got to feel for them because they are operating under a larger umbrella that is kind of like, you know, pulling the strings, so to speak. Now, Ralph Noyes, like we have Nick Pope now with the Ministry of Defence, Ralph Noyes also from 1969 to 1972, Noyes oversaw the government's Defence Secretariat, part of whose remit was to investigate claims of UFO sightings. Interestingly, it was Noyes who had met with David Daniels again, and David Daniels had spent 3 days with him while Daniels visited him in London. This is where the reptilian had summoned 3 huge circular white UFOs in the sky not far from the Elstree studios to prove he was from another world after spending three days with him, from around January of 85. Noyes had been impressed but nevertheless warned the House of Lords. He warned the House of Lords to have no dealings with Daniels after certain peers had become concerned. Noyes had communicated this through letters to UFO researcher Norman Trent back in 1985. Brenda has the correspondence. Noyes also went on, and I have this book, Noyes went on to write a science fiction novel based on the Rendlesham drama called A Secret Property. And of course, Jenny Randall's found the book amusing, but he tried to put a lot of what he believed in that book. It's out of print now, and they're asking ridiculous prices. But this man was there, had met David Daniels, as did Lord Hill Norton. Now, what's interesting is that all of this with synchronicities with regards to this David Daniels, this mysterious character that disappeared. He literally just disappeared after a couple of years. And I believe that he was wanted by people in Scotland Yard wanted him because there was trumped up charges of a murder in London that no one knows anything about. But this guy is mysterious. He seemed to appear in Australia, America, England, and we believe that we had also met him once, long before I got involved in Rendlesham, long before I knew Brenda. through a Beams visit to Rendlesham after Peter Robbins' visit with Larry Warren. So we'd gone to Rendlesham some time before. A minibus was hired, and we, Susan and Ronnie and myself, along with many others, went on a trip to the forest for a C5 initiative. Stopped off at a local pub, and I can't remember the name of the pub. It's not the one that we used to frequent. It was another one. It wasn't far from the forest. Ready to get something to eat, and a young blonde-haired man in his 40s approached us. He had not been part of the group and called himself Joseph. Ronald and Susan saw his hand change into plastic. Now, Susan and Ronald are like me. We're very grounded. We're not gullible. But they were frightened because they saw his hand turn in like plastic. He remained with the group, and he wanted to come to the forest with us while we did the C5 initiative. He wouldn't leave us alone. It's like he just got into your head, was in here, trying to find out everything about you, and it became annoying. And we wanted rid of him. And little did I realize we were glad, because he went to his car to get our pair of boots, the only pair in there. And, you know, it was as if he'd already known that there was going to be a group going there to do a C5 initiative. So he disappeared. But on the way back in the minibus, when we concluded, it was a failed light. You know, when you have one of those events and you think, oh, you feel really let down by it, because there was too many people. It would have worked because all the energies were all different. But anyway, all they were talking about on this minibus, all they all talked about was Joseph. And then going forward all those years later to how this guy, David Daniels, Father Daniels, and other guises, was this one of the same? Brenda says, no, you couldn't have met him. Why not? Why not? It's possible, isn't it? Sky Crash, when I wrote Sky Crash with Brenda, Kapelbaum Publishing wanted the book, and it was published in 2013. However, it suffered badly. You know, as an investigator, as a researcher, as an author, whatever we are, you know, I've never claimed anything, you will always get attacked. And it was kind of like really deflating because I felt from the start the Sky Crash throughout time would literally sky crash because most people only wanted to hear about the famous 1980 event. Did you know there is tumuli within the forest itself, ancient burial grounds? One wonders, doesn't it, how the dead, the other side, consciousness seems to attract or draw these other energies towards these areas. It's not just about the appearance of UFOs that seem to be manifesting from other dimensions of reality or from the quantum realm, wherever they're coming from. But you'll find this continuously that people say, nope, it was only the 1980 event, and who are you to do this kind of thing? We're not interested. That's fine, it hurts, I'll walk away from it, that's fine. But the facts are there. It's interesting, the same with Skinwalker Ranch in Utah. I bet a lot of you would love to go out there, I would. But of course, it's off limits. And of course, you know, there's been a lot of scientific evaluation and experimentation done there to bring new technology from them. Not technology. This is what makes me laugh about UFOs. It's technology of the mind. Because the mind is the real force of what we represent. The mind manifests and creates. And this force obviously molds itself into our reality in ways that we could only, you know, dream of. I do believe it's possible that the military-industrial complex know a hell of a lot more about this. And this is why they're trying to dumb us all down, literally. So Philip Mantle, British ufologist, runs Flying Disc Press, and he said, I'd like to republish Sky Crash throughout time because you as the authors have the rights back from the publishers. I said, sure, Philip, because I think it's just going to be buried anyway. You can do what you like with it. But the new version is much better because it's got a lot more illustrations in it. But sadly, like most things, it just, you know, I don't know, it's like Roswell, I suppose, isn't it? Quite controversial. Talking about Roswell, not here. How long have I got? Have I got half an hour left? Lovely. Talking about Roswell, this is what makes me laugh. We all know the case is one of the most famous UFO events in history, and I believe it happened. And of course, the press released a statement. They were in possession, or the army was in possession of a crashed disc, and then changed it to a secret Mogul balloon. So secret, in fact, ladies and gentlemen, and I just say this, that the army didn't even know it was out there. Mac Brazel, a sheep rancher, went to the sheriff's office and brought this debris. If it was that secret, you know, why weren't the army aware that it was there in the first place? I believe there were bodies, what we would call non-human entities, extraterrestrial biological entities, and I do believe that it's possible that part of the craft came away from the original craft, and of course the debris that was scattered went from an enormous area. It wasn't just a little place, you know, it was scattered everywhere. So the secret began at that point. Now, I have to explain about this case that we had in April the 9th, 2016, the most remarkable and interesting UFO sighting that occurred to me and my brother, and also involved my niece, who she kind of like accepts the UFO hypothesis, but she now believes it because she was there to see it herself. So Rendlesham with Sky Crash, with the areas, I'll go back to that in just a moment, but on the 9th of April 2016, my brother and I, my sister and my niece, we got in separate cars, had gone to some police friends in Coppola village, not far from where we lived, to celebrate an early birthday meal. I didn't drink because I was driving, I don't normally drink anyway, and I drove my brother there, and my niece and my sister had gone separately. Now, the time is roughly around about 20 to 10 when we left our police friends in Copel. So my sister and my niece go first in their car. It's a clear night. The stars are out. It's a little bit cold, and they go off. So I get in the car, get my brother in there. We're driving back to Kempston from Copel, and the time is nearing around about... sorry, it was later than that. I keep getting mixed up with the 10:15 p.m. UFO and the 11:15 p.m. UFO on the 9th of April for the 8th of June 1998. So the time is around about 20 to 11, sorry, not 20 to 10, that was the UFO before, but this is the time. So 20 to 11, around about maybe quarter to 11, for argument's sake, as I'm coming onto the bypass and driving down, I can see these three huge lights in the sky. And they're in a triangular formation, and they're hovering close to around about where we lived. And the first thing that came through to my mind and my brother's mind was that there are some workman's lights out there. We didn't see them coming to Copel, but they were there nevertheless. So as I'm driving back and coming under Cow Bridge, I stop the car because the lights have descended. They are big. I wind down my window, and I'm hearing there's no sound. And I'm like, that's really weird. So as we drive back, there are three huge white spherical objects they're about 90 feet above us. They are huge. They are in a triangular formation. They were not one device. They were separate because you could see the stars through them. But I got out my car, my brother did, and my mobile phone, my man bag with my mobile phone is buzzing. Someone's trying to get hold of me. I can't be bothered. I'm like, I'm more interested in them because getting out the car, it's like, wow, that is amazing. I can still see it now. So the objects were in a triangular formation. So where my brother and I were standing as we got out the car looking up, one to the front and two to the back. But the one to the far left started to move very slowly to the one in front, stopped. It went back into its original position. Then they positioned themselves into a perfect line, like 1, 2, 3, you could measure the spaces, and then they shot off. And I thought, oh my God, that is incredible. So and the other thing I need to report is when we were there, there was no one around. It's 11:15 at night on a Saturday night. There's no one coming from the pub, no one walking their dogs, there's nothing. And when you talk, it's like it snowed. So when I pick up my phone and it's ringing again, it's my niece, and I said to her, these were my exact words, "Are you phoning about the UFOs?" And she said, "Have you seen them?" I said, "They have just descended. There were 3 of them. They were here." So my niece, what happened was that before they reached me and my brother, I'm not saying we're special here, they stopped and descended. She'd filmed them. She'd seen them, got out her car and filmed them. The film was handed to Jason Gleaves. They've been analysed. They are unknowns. They're huge. And these are the images The 9th of April 2016 heralded the arrival of 3 massive white illuminated UFOs which arrived in spectacular fashion above a house in Kempston, Bedford. The time was 11:15 p.m. at night. These images are taken from the film my niece took of them while en route and analysed by Jason Glees. They are unknown. This is just a daylight comparison here to show you where they would have been where my niece was in the sky. So it was dark, but they've used this comparison. They are the objects. Now, there's the objects there on the far left of what they represented. When we had seen them, they were massive. Now, Dave Twine, he's now deceased, bless him, had contacted me, and he told me that they had also seen these lights all the way down into the old Stony Cross area. But the UFOs have been tracked from the Isles of Scilly. And UFO researcher Andy Thomas then told me when I went to go to a conference, he said, Philip, the trajectory of those objects look like they are using the Mary St. Michael ley line. The UFOs were going across, the 3 of them, and I had a representative from Beams contact me and say to me, well, it couldn't have been at 11:15 at night, it must have been 10:15. I said, listen to me, mate, I'm not changing my testimony, that was the time. And they said there must have been 2 sets of them. I said, well, I can't prove that. So this is incredible, because they were tracked from the Isles of Scilly and coming straight across. But they had descended and stopped, and they did this strange maneuver. Now, the next day, on the 10th of April, because the event happened on the 9th of April, the 10th of April, slightly earlier, about 8 o'clock, there came this ruckus over the house. I went out, and there is a unmarked, by the way, I just used this, that's not actually a picture of the helicopter. There was an unmarked white helicopter that was flying so low over our house. When I went outside, the pilots, again, had positioned the helicopter so it was tilted so that we could see the 2 pilots, and it was circling around 3 times before it then took off. What on earth was that all about? And my devious mind was thinking, well, if we reported it, or anyone else, people will say, the press would say to people, oh, you mean the helicopters? Because if you don't record it, people can get confused, can't they? Well, we know that from a lot of the disruptions that's going on in the world at the moment. But that was absolutely incredible. And it still astounds me what that was all about. And this is the thing, the phenomena leaves no clues. It just leaves you with more questions. Now, this subsequently then led me to write You, the Public Deceive, the Grand UFO Deception, which deals primarily with a lot of the psychic component, that we're dealing with a technology of the mind. We're perhaps dealing with an energy or entities which are so far removed from our process or understanding of creation. And this obviously goes back into the past with the ancient codices, because originally, apparently, we have been genetically modified by extraterrestrials. They were known as it could have been the Archonic Force, the Archons. But, if we were the result of some kind of reproduction, and these beings had created another species that could not reproduce, well, we have a spirit, do we not? And people say, oh no, back in the 80s, no, you can't ever connect consciousness or the afterlife with ufology. Well, why not? Why? We're now beginning to, and that was brought out in my thesis back in 1996. There are parallels to be made with regards to the mind. The mind are those connections to altered levels of reality. Would you agree? Yes. The system we serve has countermanded everything that we understand, everything we know, and we understand why they're doing it, because they're saying, well, we're not going to let you know that UFOs are real. And ask yourself this question, ladies and gentlemen. The recent events with the Pentagon, I know that Ross Coulthard, I've been in touch with him just briefly. I was fascinated by the event with David Grush. You know all about that. People cry out, oh, it can't be right. Look, would you really believe that a man like David Grush, a high intelligence officer, would come forward with claims like that? They're crying out. They know something. But what is it that the system is protecting? It's either far worse than we can imagine. And before I go on here, oh yes, ladies and gentlemen, we've told you, we've made you believe that UFOs aren't real, but now we changed the acronym to UAP, Unidentified Aerial Phenomena. Closer to home, isn't it? Extraterrestrial entity, non-human entity. This was mentioned earlier, we know about this. What is that? What is a non-human entity? Why have they taken off the extraterrestrial hypothesis? And, We're told, oh, well, there's life on other planets, but it's too far away for us to worry about. No, it seems to be close to home, doesn't it? Far closer. Now, it could be possible that the system that we serve that has lied to us, and it systematically lies, confuses, no transparency, confuses our consciousness, and I believe also consciously it uses psychological weaponry. It knows about the mind. These critters know about them. I'm not talking about the good guys here, to understand, because people put me in a bracket and say, oh, you're a negative guy, you deal with the baddies. Well, I want to, because know thy enemy. Would you agree? So, our consciousness is subjugated and controlled by a system that's obviously operating by a force that cannot be human. The orders, the instructions cannot be human. We are seeing some kind of terraforming, and then, as Miles Johnson said, transhumanism, taking away our individuality, our spiritual right. And people are beginning to fight back, but I think the truth will be far more horrifying. I don't claim anything. But psychically, I was quite interested in what this technology and biological specimens they have. I saw these huge reptilians in armor in my mind. I can't prove it, but I just saw 2 huge reptilians in cryogenically freeze. They've got more than that, obviously, but it'd be interesting, wouldn't it? So we know that the system we serve is continuously, and it's so frustrating, lying to us. But can you imagine if the truth did come out? Well, ladies and gentlemen, yes, UFOs or UAPs are real, but we got a problem. Because most of these beings come in, they can abduct you. We need to also explain to you about the real essence of what you represent on not just a biological level, but a spiritual level. And this will open up a can of worms, literally. And the people will rebel because they say, well, hang on just a minute. The Sunday school version that we've been sold is no longer applicable. So, and of course, you're now telling us that all these other connection links are making us realize that we're more than human, and you've held us in enslavement, conscious enslavement, and mental subjugation. No way. It's not going to happen. So these experiences have led me, like many, on a quest to seek the truth and formulate certain theoretical models centered around these levels of high strangeness. When you get involved, you go through a process of mental transmutation. We are not merely dealing with one singularity here, but a multitude of them. Are we looking at one force entirely or separate forces at work? The interdimensional hypothesis must be brought into the fray because the human is so far removed from all these other areas of inquiry. In short, where are they all hanging out? So I thought that perhaps is the phenomena operating on a psychic level? Are such forces as the Greys able to penetrate the realm via consciousness, the domain of all that is? The UFO topic also brings into the fray life after death, the other side, and alternative levels of reality. Our system has done its best throughout the centuries to subjugate human consciousness through fear, control, and propaganda. A new weapon of divide and disruption against the human to think or indeed use their own mental ability. We are far more powerful and unique than we have been told and sold. Many are awakening from the deep sleep they have been experiencing within this life. Now, the other interesting thing is that on a theoretical level, when we are dealing with the multiple facets, with the different forms of ufology, the dogman, the werewolf, the Sasquatch, the Greys, even those in the dead, what's interesting is that the phenomena seems to pull you in. It feeds from fear. And I believe that whatever is operating behind the scenes, like in the Wizard of Oz, the men or the monsters behind the curtain, they utilize fear as a means of feeding, of surviving. Now, with the Greys, they mind speak, and so it's been known also for the Sasquatch, and also the dogman, known here in England as the werewolf. It's interesting how mythology has turned into a reality. So the intelligence knows how to morph itself very quickly. The case of Martin Groves and the wonderful United States of America, a law enforcement officer who had an experience with one of these dogmen. Let me tell you, it changed his entire life. Here in England, Paul Sinclair, my good friend Paul Sinclair, he recounts a case where a dogman had appeared to a couple. They were absolutely shocked, and it was wearing an earring in its ear. What does that tell you? And if there's some kind of mind speak, I think, I'm not here to shatter anyone's perception of their reality, of how they see the phenomena, but think about the facts. Where are they? If they're genetically modified as some kind of a military workforce, I could understand that. But none of them has come to the fore at the moment. And there is this physical and interdimensional hypothesis, and I believe that our governments, well, higher than the governments actually, the secret governments, have back-engineered reverse technology. And think on this that I thought of as well, because we've only got about 15 minutes left. Think on this. Crashed UFOs. Interesting. Another hypothesis to consider on a theoretical level. Roswell came down, didn't it? And the bits were salvaged and taken back to obviously industrial military units. They would have given it all the care and attention like the crown jewels in the world. They back-engineered, apparently, allegedly, they back-engineered most of that technology. Okay, so these are aliens, and they crash a ship with technology that we could just about unravel. Isn't that strange? As though there is some kind of force that wants to steer us, a patient force, into a new area of technological advancement and lead towards transhumanism. Don't you think it's very odd? And I believe it's possible that this force integrates itself into our reality, manifesting, because a lot of the reports, I spoke to Dr. Irina Scott, brilliant lady, and with regards to her connection to Bethel and also the study of UFO materials, is that when allegedly, we can't prove this, but I do believe it, when they analyze the so-called material that's retrieved from these crash retrievals, most of it is elements of Earth, but there's a little something of something else that's in there. So I wonder whether or not this intelligence, this force, molds itself into our reality. It must. It has to in order to make entry, briefly, like we need a deep sea diving suit to exist under the sea or a space suit to exist in space. So it's interesting, isn't it? I think, on the whole, we are dealing with something that's reminding us and gives us the hope that we are much more than biological automatons with a sell-by date. We are much more than flesh and bone. And yet, unfortunately and sadly, we live in a world that's so corrupted and disrupted, broken. We don't know what to do. This is only part of it. And yes, the powers that be, one wonders whether the elite have switched most of us consciously in themselves, have switched most of us off. And I believe that through psychic technology, they know when you are thinking outside the box, because you find that they could be sending their agents in to go and check you over. Have you ever considered that? Like, why are you different? Why are you different from the rest of the herd? I did an experiment years ago where I would go out really happy, I'm going to help everyone, and I had the worst day imaginable. It was as though the force knew. Have you had that? It's as though, bing, bing, in a military base. Yes, look, 1, 2, 5, 4, 3, 7, 1. We can't have that. Let's bring them down. Flick that switch. And when you get really miserable and angry, and it's all reversed, isn't it? I know about energy, psychic energy, all that, but I believe that this system could be working hand in claw with a certain faction of these so-called non-human intelligences, bringing them into our reality and giving them riches and rewards beyond measure, but in turn working towards their enslavement or feeding off of us. One wonders, as I said again, whether the elite have switched most of us off consciously in themselves, drawing such interdimensional entities into this matrix. I've also pondered as to why certain individuals are selected for abduction, or to see a dogman, werewolf, or whatever. It is obvious the system we serve knows the secrets of what we represent beyond the flesh and blood and are themselves in collusion with certain interdimensional entities. We have been lied to on a presented level, and we are at war. A psychological war now. Not one with guns and bombs and weapons, but the mind. And lastly, why the denial? What is the system afraid to tell us? What does it really know? That question hangs in the balance. And I think all of you have your own unique perspective of how you view that reality. Remember that you're your own creation. Everyone's trying to squeeze it into the same box. I said this before, it won't fit. It will not fit. Because your journey, your experience is unique to you. You understand? And for that, I just have to say, I've got my book. It's £10. I think I've got 9 copies on me. And thank you for your kind attention. Thank you. Thank you very much.